Welcome back to our series on living the life you love, how to get free from anxiety, depression, and stress. In the last video, we worked with a process for finding your core fear, the root cause of all of your problems. Hopefully you've had a chance to practice it, and the more you do practice it with different problems, you'll see that there is one core fear underneath all of your problems. It takes different forms at different times, of course. It's very helpful to know that whenever you're upset or suffering in any way, that core fear is at work. And this fear comes from something we learned in childhood. We can talk about the psychological base for it. But right now, our intention is to work on how to get free from anxiety, depression, and stress, which means we simply want to know, once we understand what our core fear is, what do we do about it? And the answer, as we've been saying, is to face it. Because in facing it, and only in facing it, do we discover that it's not real. It doesn't have the power to do what it threatened to do. We live through our fear and see, first of all, it didn't kill us. And second of all, most of what we were worried about, maybe all of it, was pure projection, as we call it in psychology. Imagination built on made-up ideas that aren't true. Again, since this comes from childhood, these ideas were made up in childhood, and it was the best thinking we could do as a child, the best way we could sort of make sense out of the world and come up with a plan for how to deal with it. But it wasn't very effective, and the real problem is we're still stuck with it today. In this video, we're going to talk about what I call the chief defense, our primary way that we deal with the core fear. What do we do to defend against or protect ourselves from or try to deal with the core fear? So again, if somebody has a core fear of abandonment and are terribly afraid of being left alone, they might have a chief defense, a primary way of handling that fear, of being what we call a caretaker or a people pleaser. They will build a whole personality style around making sure other people are pleased with them so that they won't be abandoned. The thinking goes, if I caretake them, if I please them, if I sacrifice myself for them, they'll be pleased with me and they won't want to leave me. Now, here's the kicker. Every defense backfires. It does the opposite of what it's designed to do. Yes, it gives us some immediate relief in the form of, all right, maybe you've pleased the person, and you feel good, now I have some security, they're not going to go away. But in the very next moment, the thought comes up, what if I didn't do it well enough? What if I have to repeat it again and better to make sure that they don't leave me? This is where the popular saying comes in. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, each time expecting different results. So in childhood, we're confronted with our core fear. Life is scary in this particular form or that. Mommy could abandon me, let's say. Then we buy into a chief defense. We can't stand that fear, so we have to find some way of making it okay. I'll please Mommy. I'll be good. I won't ever do anything to upset her, to make her leave. This is just one example out of the repertoire of human behavior that we buy into. So you want to find your own version of that. Once we've found our chief defense, the secret, again, is to face the fear, but I'm going to say it a little differently in this video. The secret is to do the opposite of what the defense tells you to do. This is facing the fear. The defense says, be a people pleaser, to make sure you don't get abandoned, to make sure that fear doesn't come true. We have to face the fear, remove the defense, and actually face the fear behind it, instead of protect ourselves from it. We maintain and preserve and aggravate our fear when we avoid it. That which you resist persists, you may have heard. So in doing the opposite of what our defense has had us do, how we've protected ourselves from the fear, and we have built an entire personality around this, then we're facing the fear to discover that it can't do anything to us, and we're free. Here's how you can find your chief defense. Look at some of the personality traits that you feel very proud of. some of the things you do to try and win in life, to succeed, to get people to cooperate with you or to do what you want. Sometimes we become very demanding, right? Sometimes we become depressed. That's actually a defense, saying, I don't want to deal with life, it's too much. That way we don't have to take the responsibility for facing our fear and dealing with life. There's, again, a huge range of possible behaviors, but ask yourself, what are some of the chief characteristics of my personality that I use to deal with life? You can get more specific and say, what do I do when there's a big problem I'm facing? How do I respond? Do I cling to someone, which is a defense of becoming dependent? Do I go into denial, another defense that people use? Do I project blame onto someone else so I don't have to feel guilt if that happens to be the form the fear is taking at the moment? Do I complain? That's a good one. Rather than saying, here's a problem, I've got to deal with it, let's get to it. And so forth. When you see what your primary personality style is for dealing with problems, ask yourself, what would the opposite be? If I'm a people pleaser and I want to rush in there to make sure somebody is pleased with me, resist. Don't do that. See what happens. Just don't say anything rather than rush in to make sure they're happy with you. Or perhaps think about what you would like in a situation instead of being so preoccupied with the other person. The more aggressively you take on the fear, the more powerful your healing will be. And it's only fear. It's only a made-up projection, an illusion that doesn't have any basis in present-day reality, a reliving of a childhood memory that doesn't serve you any longer. Now, it's no use to jump in whole hog and try and face all of your fear at once and overwhelm yourself. You want to take it in measured doses, of course. But again, you need to stretch yourself. You need to take on a certain amount of the fear, a certain amount of what your depression, in this case, if that's what you're struggling with, says not to do, or your anxiety says not to do. And each time you take on even a little bit, the rewards are remarkable because you realize nothing bad happened. It becomes extremely reinforcing, extremely powerful, and it gets you excited about what can come next. So to conclude this video, you might write down a list of your fears, different problems you have, and how they relate to the core fear underneath. That's what we did in the last exercise. And in this case, what is your chief defense to all of those fears or problems? What do you do primarily? What's the one thing that sort of describes all of your behaviors underneath it all that you can now start thinking about doing the opposite of? And the next several videos are going to be different techniques which describe various ways of doing the opposite of what your defense says to do.